the last segment, we talked about what the American in Psychology Today, a psychologist has reported this study done by a psychologist at Brown University, essentially on the notion, it seemed overwhelmingly clear and true, that transgenderism, the identity people claim for themselves, saying that they're not really the gender they thought they were there or that they were born with, they're really the other, that has been the Psychology Today article is saying there's a lot to do with this that has to do with social contagion, which has to do with reading things online, getting inculcated by culture, and then getting confused by it, rather than actually being a thing you are, that you really were transgender since for your whole life. One last thing, back to the Psychology Today, they said the term transgenderism, while often used, is now considered out of date and stigmatizing. Now you're only supposed to talk about transgender identity. So transgender identity is the only term you're allowed to use. This psychologist, by the way, at Brown, was heavily attacked and criticized for publishing the factual data relating to her study, proving that many young people who are coming out as transgender, when you study their life and their experiences and their families and their behaviors through life, the transgender identity was emerging not as a result of anything biological, not anything about who they are humanly, biologically, but there was coming to the surface, it was coming out because of advocacy by the leftists in this country, advocacy for transgenderism or transgender identity or dysphoria as being a norm. It was a social contagion, to use her conclusion. But now let me turn to the American Psychiatric Association, because I'm going to get around to making this point. American people, our culture, our country, we have to decide what we agree is the norm or not. We have to decide. We cannot defer to the transgender advocates, the LGBTQ community, especially the transgender identity advocates. We cannot defer to them what we accept as a society in terms of what is good, what is right, what is healthy, and what is to be taught to our children. Because right now, what's being taught to our children is anything the transgender identity community wants taught to them. We have already surrendered to them because we weren't alert to it and recognizing how this ideology was weaving its way into the schools. But now I want to turn, that was a psychologist study, now we're turning to the psychiatrist, the psychiatry industry. And I'm just going to tell you, the psychiatry industry, when you ask, and there was a definition, this is from the American Psychiatric Association, you ask them, is being transgender a mental disorder? And this was, they were asked the question, they gave this answer. Here is the answer of the American Psychiatric Association. A psychological state is considered a mental disorder only if it causes significant distress or disability. Many transgender people do not experience their gender as distressing or disabling, which implies identifying as transgender does not constitute a mental disorder. Basically, they're going to say, if you're happy with it, it's not a disorder. And so I raise that to say, I don't really care personally if the American Psychiatric Association lists transgenderism as a disorder or not. I don't care if they list, for years they listed homosexuality as a mental disorder, and now they don't. I am not advocating, I don't really care whether the American Psychiatric Association lists transgenderism as a mental disorder. But I do care that people in this country want to give any deference at all to the American Psychiatric Association in terms of how we as a culture, a society, a people as a country handle and respond to this strident advocacy from the transgender identity community movement to insist that all of us must abandon everything we've ever thought and agree with what the transgender advocates are saying it must be the norm. I want to make a little bit more of a point about not deferring to the American Psychiatric Association. So my wonderful producer Matt I sent him a list of the American Psychiatric Association. They had a 2019 meeting this year. I think it was in San Francisco, and they had this is the American American Psychiatric Association, and they listed these as their, and there were so many topics, you can't even believe it. I'm just going to list in some of their topics. Like you go to a conference and they have breakout topics. 1, women's health in the U.S., disruption and exclusion in the time of Trump. Seriously. Next one, gender bias in academic psychiatry in the era of the Me Too movement. Next, treating Muslim patients after the travel ban. Best practices in using the APA Muslim Mental Health Toolkit. Next, addressing microaggressions towards sexual and gender minorities, caring for LGBTQ plus patients and providers. Next, aren't there more? Oh yeah, sex, drugs, and culturally responsive treatment, addressing substance use disorders in the context of sexual and gender diversity. I got to cut it off there because I'm going to run out of time for racism and the war on terror, implications for mental health providers in the U.S. Folks, there had to be 30 topics in this conference. You could have taken the radical left Democrat Party platform and stuck it up on that list of the various things you could choose to go to, the various talks, presentations you could go to at the American Psychiatric Association meeting, and there would have been no difference. What you saw when you see the listing of topics the American Psychiatric Association chose for their annual meeting, you go to learn things like lawyers. We have meetings. You go and they say, latest on the law on blah, blah, blah. They're talking law. These people, they just take the American Psychiatric Association left-wing agenda view on every conceivable topic, including transgenderism, and say, whatever the left-wing view is, they are normalizing, they are legitimizing, they're making it what they stand for. My point in getting this to you is the American Psychiatric Association cannot be our source, cannot be anyone's source in handling and dealing with and responding to the aggression, the strident aggression of the transgender identity advocates in pushing their transgender identity advocacy on children in this country. The psychiatrists cannot be the source of the answers because they aren't really, remember the definition, they're not going to call anything a mental disorder unless you're unhappy about it. So I guess if I thought I was really, a strawberry, then I guess I'm a strawberry, or I'm a cucumber, or I'm a, zebra. As long as it doesn't distress me to think that, they're saying, hey, you're not disordered. So we don't have to in our country, and we must be alert to not agreeing that the leftist American Psychiatric Association characterization has anything to do with what we as a country do in responding to this strident LGBTQ gender identity agenda.